People who were on reality family shows as kids, think Super Nanny, Wife Swap, etc. How much of it was real and how much was fiction, set up for drama? Did anything change?
A girl I went to school with was on my super sweet 16. She was always quiet but well liked, and the kids on that show were usually monsters, so we were curious about how the episode would paint her. There was one scene where she was checking in on a vendor and they said something might not be finished in time for the party, and she didn't have a meltdown or anything, but she said something dramatic like, "Oh no. That's going to ruin my whole birthday party." After the episode aired, her friends who were with her said they did a couple of takes because her first reaction was like, "Oh, that sucks. Thanks for letting me know."
My parents were dinner guests in an episode of Nanny 911, and they said literally everything was staged. I don't remember all of the details, but they said the directors had a code word that they would say to the kids when they were supposed to start acting all crazy. And then once the scene was done, the kids would be perfectly normal.
I was on a dog training TV show when I was 8-ish. The idea was that the dog trainer came in and helped our family integrate our new puppy into our household, to give us training tips and advice, etc. The whole thing was basically bogus. The trainer came to our house for maybe 30 minutes tops and gave us extremely basic advice. The producers also told us we had to get changed and pretend that he was visiting us 3 months later after he gave us the advice and how it had made our life better, yada yada yada. It's so dumb because our puppy was clearly the same age in the before and 3 months after shots, and my family aren't actors, so our reactions were really fake. One of the producers also made me say, "I love you. Dog's name / while hugging him for about 6 takes.
I knew a girl who was on the tiny home show with her mom. She said they had already bought the tiny home, and the show set things up like they were looking at a bunch of others and picked that one.
I worked with 2 people who were on Teen Mom, grandmother and granddaughter. The granddaughter was the teen mom. They told me that the directors would intentionally set up stuff that would cause drama and then start filming. For example, the directors had them go out to lunch and told the grandmother something she didn't know yet and filmed their argument for drama, knowing she would get upset that the granddaughter hadn't told her before, even though she was planning to. Really dumb, unnecessary drama for TV. But apparently the baby got tons of scholarships and support from the show, which is why they did it in the first place, so they said it was worth it.
My dad was asked to be on an episode of TLC's My Strange Addiction. He runs kind of a niche, small business. And they were like, "Hey, you're addicted to this, right?" And he was like, no. And they were like, "Well, can you pretend to be addicted to this and you can be on the show?" And he was like, no. Edit. It was a honeybee business. They were hoping he was addicted to bee stings.
I was on Wife Swap when I was 10 years old. My family had to switch with a farming family, and we were supposed to be the city family even though my family and I lived in the suburbs. There were plenty of quotes taken out of context, as you'd expect. They also incited plenty of drama. I was framed as addicted to video games, so they took my Xbox and Game Boy Color for the week. A few days in, one of the crew members came in with my Game Boy and said, "Look, I found this," and handed it to me. It shouldn't be surprising that they sent the woman staying in our house into my room to catch me in the act. To be honest, not much has really changed in my life except getting Snapchats of my 10-year-old face when my friends catch the reruns. I'm open to any questions if anyone is curious. Edit. It was season 3 episode 13 of Wife Swap.
There was a family in our neighborhood who was on a show here in Germany. One day, when accompanied by the camera crew, one of the daughters suddenly threw a screaming fit in public, which was totally unusual for her. When the mom was asked later what the beep had happened, she said, "For a tantrum you get $200 extra."
A classmate of mine was on My Country's Next Top Model. Before getting into the show, she was asked what kind of hair she would never want to get, so that the producers know about it and not make her have it during the makeover episode. My classmate had long blonde hair which she really loved. So she said she doesn't want him to cut her hair off, and that she also hated strange unnatural colors like blue, pink, etc. Fast forward to the makeover episode. The hairstyling team comes in and finds her hair unfitting for a model. So she needs to get a makeover, and guess what? Her makeover obviously consists of a pixie cut and green hair to make her look like a punk fairy. My classmate cried throughout the entire process. So I guess the producers got the drama they wanted out of this.
Yup. A close friend was on MTV's True Life about having crippling social anxiety disorder. The episode was about different fears people had. We were a big circle of friends since elementary. We always knew he was sorta socially awkward and battled with the way he looked. He was super insecure and self-conscious about his looks. And he admittedly got teased the most by the more alphas of the group, the most insecure. But we loved and embraced him and made sure he knew that and that he was equals with us. Anyway, they filmed us all for a couple weeks in high school hanging out. This was back in 2001 by the way, going out, etc. He was crushing on a girl we knew, in fact she was part of the larger social circle anyway, and so they convinced him to ask for her number. I guess this was gonna be the storyline they needed. He already had it since we were all one big friend group, but they needed something for the story. That was like, the big goal, for his arc. So he asks one night while we were at the movie theater. She gave it to him, all's good. They went on one date but didn't amount to anything, but they remained friends just as they were before. Fast forward to airing, and I don't know if you remember at the end of each episode they have just text on a black screen with like, the final update. The text for his final update read, despite finally building the courage to ask for her number. She gave him a fake number. He spiraled after that and it beat him up way more than he was before. He turned to drugs to cope, since he was basically humiliated on MTV with hundreds of millions of viewers. He unfortunately passed away from a drug overdose a few years later. Miss you Goomba. Edit. Coincidentally, MTV has done everything they can to wipe that episode off the internet and pretend it never existed. We've never been able to find it and a few of us are very Google Fu inclined and resourceful with internet archival retrieval, but it's nowhere to be found. Every other EP is available though. They know they beep up.
I worked with a junk removal company for an episode of Hoarders and it was actually 99% real. The only thing that they would set up a couple times was if they opened a box and found something interesting off camera they would reopen it on camera and act like they just found it.
One of my neighbors was on a house disaster reno show and it was a mixed bag. I think the crew hired by the show actually did very competent structural reno and repair type work, but the designer had super niche tastes, so the family ended up repainting everything and pitching all the decoration-y aspects to get the house ready for resale after having to act super happy for the cameras.
I can't even remember what the show was called because I was pretty young. Based on my googling it was _3 wishes on NBC. I had a neighbor around my age who was pretty sick and my mom used to give them rides and make the family food and stuff. They brought my mom and I in to interview us and I remember it just being really awkward and strange. They told me a bunch of stuff to say that I didn't like and my mom objected to. Looking back on it now I realize they were trying to get material for a sick kid with only one friend storyline, but I just wasn't a good enough actor to make it work. They ended up using nothing from us at all. They trucked snow into their front yard and I got to play in that though, so that was kinda cool as a kid from LA. But then they just left and between the snow and the equipment they'd used to film their yard was totally destroyed. They moved away pretty soon after that, so I'm not even sure what happened with them.
I was on the dating show, Eliminate. It was set up to the point that the producers did their best to create drama by pushing questions like, XYZ was really acting like an ass that last round. Tell us about what an ass XYZ is. I felt the final show edits were pretty accurate to the real-life events though.
My friend's parents were on World's Strictest Parents. They came to my house on 4th of July and when they showed our house on TV it was a huge mansion rather than our actual house. The camera crew also told the visiting bad kids to steal alcohol from our house.
Not me, but I bumped into someone that was on the Property Brothers show. According to them, the two brothers were only ever on site for the filming. They threw out / hauled away all the person's furniture and what it was replaced with was very pretty looking but hard and uncomfortable, bad quality, like had to be replaced within a year, bad quality, impractical for the family, and the family could not get anything from before the makeover back that they wanted.
I used to know someone whose neighbor actually was a participant on Extreme Makeover. Here's a link of basically what I remember. No such thing as a free house. Foreclosures are all too common. Shady taxes, lawsuits and legal action and #X200B. Edit. What people really don't understand is that the large majority of these families are barely scraping by, and they are then given this gigantic mansion with bills that was 3x what they are used to.
My dad was a cameraman on one of the Bravo channel's Real Housewives of. He said 99% is made up.
Ooh, I finally have a response. My boyfriend and I filmed the pilot for a show. It's in production currently and is supposed to be picked up by blank. The show features us and another couple going on cheap dates with a fixed budget. The couple with the best cheap date wins an expensive date package. There were a lot of weird moments. When engaging with the host, she kept messing up her lines and would sometimes say something several times before getting it right, and we had to react like she didn't spend 3 minutes stuttering. None of the conversations with her were natural, because she would pause to reword her lines a lot while we sat there with a frozen smile on. We were prompted what to say frequently, and did a lot of retakes. It took all day to film, 2 hours. Everything had to be set up. Everything. We were micked at each location change. Business owners had to agree to us popping up. Sometimes we'd say something and the director would ask us to repeat it. The cameras are hard to ignore. Especially when at any second the director would say, talk about underscore 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 but in full statements. It was fun though. I really liked talking to the sound guy about his experiences. He was telling some industry horror stories. Also, me and my boyfriend lost, so we went to a bar and laughed about it. Edit. Taking out any identifying details.
So, not technically a big well-known reality show. But there used to be a home makeover show that had 5 different designers that would get their own episode on a rotational basis, and my mom was one of them. For one of her episodes, she actually did a makeover of our own house as she was selling it. She made my brother and I stay with her for the week of filming. Parents are divorced, which I thought was weird, but whatever. She roped my teen brother into making some art for the show, so he got his little bit of fame, and I just hid in my room the whole week. I remember I thought I had caught my mom alone, and we had a conversation where I expressed how uncomfortable I felt with people in our home, and why did I have to stay that week at her house, as there was no arrangement ever on which house my brother and I stayed at. Anyways, some camera guy snuck up on us and filmed the whole thing, without me knowing, and then asked me if I could repeat myself, but be more mad at my mom. I felt so violated. Also, the fact there were 4 mid-20-year-olds hanging out right outside my bedroom the whole week. I was 16/17, and that was just so beep creepy now that I think about it years later.
I was a competing realtor on $1 Million listing for an episode. I am not, nor have I ever been a realtor.
My dad was on Bozo the Clown. It was as normal as it is on television.
May your day be filled with joy and happiness. And please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more quality content every day.